Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. I am King Pigley. This is Gaming Imperfectly, and welcome to the channel, guys. Welcome back. And if you are new to the channel, I am King Pigley, and I hope you like what you see, because what we do here on Gaming Imperfectly is a little bit of everything. But here lately, I've been telling true stories. I've been talking about things that actually happened, missing persons, kind of the dark, macabre, mysterious. And today, I'm just going to talk about a factual, beyond belief, true life Rambo. So stick around, because this one is crazy. Roy Benavidez, guys. We're going to talk about Roy Benavidez. If you don't know who Roy Benavidez is, strap on your boots, lace them up tight, guys, and get ready, because this is an insane story. And it is 110% true. All right? Roy Benavidez was born back in the 30s and grew up being picked on because where he went to school here in the United States, he was half Mexican and half Indian, Native American. And a lot of the kids picked on him and didn't treat him very well because of his ethnic background. However, Roy kind of just dealt with it stoically. He was one of those kids that just kind of like, whatever, and just kind of dealt with it. But at 8 years old, Roy had to actually drop out of school to help support his family. And that's the kind of guy that Roy was. That tells you a lot about the guy that would eventually become the man, Roy Benavidez. But Roy, as I said, left school at the age of 8 to go and work, and he worked very hard to support his family. And it wasn't long after he was able to, at the age of 18, that he joined the Army. And eventually Roy got married, and he was sent off in the 1950s to fight in the Korean War, which he did. When he came back from Korea, he went into jump school. That, if you don't know, in the Army is where you go to become a member of the Airborne, and he actually did. He graduated jump school, became a member of the 82nd Airborne Division out of Fort Bragg. And then in 1965, Vietnam was starting to kick off. And Roy was sent as a liaison to the ARVN, or ARV, which is the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, which was the south of Vietnam. And South Vietnam and North Vietnam, for guys that don't know history of the Vietnam War, all of Vietnam was not one country at one point in time. It was split into two nations, in the North and the South. And the North were more communist. They were led by a man named Ho Chi Minh. And then the South were more democratic and more backed by the United States. Prior to that, it was the French. Nonetheless, whether we should have been there or shouldn't have been there, Roy found himself there in 1965. And Roy was sent out to scout behind enemy lines, dressed up like a Vietnamese soldier, like a Viet Cong, which must have been really strange. I'm not really sure, but maybe they thought the Indian, Mexican skin, I don't know. But they sent Roy behind enemy lines by himself, guys, to look for bad guys because he wanted to scout and get some intelligence. Well, during this mission, Roy ended up stepping on a landmine and blew him up. And a few hours later, as he's laying on the ground, completely blown to smithereens and dying, a platoon of Marines come along and find him. And when they first see the body laying there, because again, he's dressed like a bad guy, because he was going behind enemy lines scouting, the Marines thought that it was a booby trap. They thought that, because that's what the Vietnamese did. Sometimes they would booby trap bodies. When you roll the body over, you'd blow up. But they eventually made their way up to this, what they thought was a corpse, flip it over, and there's Roy laying there. He's got dog tags, and he's Hispanic, Native American. So they were like, holy crap. So they go in, they get Roy help. Roy ends up waking up in a hospital back in the United States. And so he's laying there in the hospital, and the doctors come in, and they're like, yeah, man, you're never going to walk again. You're never, you're done. Your Army career is done. But remember, Roy at this point in time was married. He was supporting a family. And not only that, but he loved being in the Army. That's what he did, guys. That's who he was, because he left school at the age of 8, and he didn't have anything else. He was a military man, and he begged the doctors, please don't kick me out of the Army. And so the doctors were like, look, there's nothing we could do about it. But Roy was not the kind of person that was just going to look and take it, be like, yeah, accept defeat and the hell with that, Roy said. So every night, Roy would get up out of his bed and drag himself across the floor, try to walk a little further every day. He'd fall, he'd hurt himself, but you know what? Over a period of time, Roy eventually started making progress beyond anybody's belief, and a year after entering the hospital, Roy walked out of the hospital. So they told him that he could stay in the Army, that he was going to have a desk job, but that's just not the guy that Roy Benavidez is, guys. So Roy decided that he wanted to go and become a Green Beret. So he went to Special Forces selection, and he went to Green Beret school, and he graduated and was actually assigned to the 5th Special Forces Group, again out of Fort Bragg. And in 1969, Roy found himself right back in Vietnam again, but this time he was Special Forces. On this particular day, Roy Benavidez was at church. It was a Sunday, and he was sitting there listening to a sermon, but he could hear the crackle of a radio from the communication bunker that was nearby. And in it, a group of his buddies, in fact, there were 3 Green Beret and 8 ARVN Special Forces members that had gone on a mission behind enemy lines. And the leader of that group was one of his really dear friends, whose name was Sergeant Leroy Wright. And among that was another one of Roy Benavidez's friends named Sergeant Russo, all right? And also another Green Beret buddy of his named Specialist O'Connor, Brian O'Connor, all right? And so they were apparently caught in an ambush, these 12 men, behind enemy lines on a secret mission, and they were just getting shot to hell, and that all hell was breaking loose for these guys. And Roy just couldn't take it anymore. Something clicked in Roy. And Roy said, from his words, is that he just kind of went into go mode. Like he just, something clicked. And so what had been happening is that out in the jungle, these Special Forces guys had called for aid, and they had tried to get help, and some helicopters had come in and tried to evacuate them to get them out, but they couldn't get to them because the firefight that they were in, the intense fire from the Northern Vietnam, they're called the NVA, Northern Vietnamese Army, was so intense that they were pinned down, and that the helicopters received such intense fire from the NVA when they came in to try to pick up and rescue these Special Forces guys, that the helicopters were shot to pieces. So they had to fly back to base. And even upon returning to base, Roy ran up to the helicopter, and one of the door gunners, which was a 19-year-old kid, had been shot 19 times and died right there. So young, tragic. But Roy was like, we're going back, and you're going to drop me off. We're going in. So he jumped into another helicopter and was actually, he was so fueled by adrenaline at this point in time and a want to save his buddies that Roy didn't even grab his firearm. He didn't grab his weapon. All he took on this helicopter, guys, and you can't make this stuff up. I mean, sometimes life is just stranger than fiction, right? Roy jumped on a helicopter with a med kit, all right, and his Bowie knife, which is a long, giant Rambo-style knife. Again, when I said real-life Rambo, I'm not joking. So they flew in, Roy's helicopter came in, and when Roy's helicopter came in, it had to dodge side to side just to try to avoid enemy fire. And as it was doing it, it was shooting and trying to lay down covering fire, but was receiving such intense fire that Roy had to jump out of the helicopter, which he absolutely did. So Roy jumps out the side of this helicopter at least 10 to 15 feet, hits the ground, runs into the jungle, and then he realizes, well, maybe that's probably not the best idea, but it's too late for second guessing right now, isn't it? He was actually, what had happened is, now that he was on the ground, he realized how desperate the situation actually was, which it was truly desperate. And by desperate, I mean there was an entire battalion of the North Vietnamese Army versus these 12 Special Forces guys. Now, for you guys that don't know military talk, a battalion of men's around 1,000 dudes. All right, so it was 1,000 guys versus 12. And by the time Roy had got there, the situation was just truly desperate. The first person that Roy, as he's running through the jungle, runs up on was Sergeant Russo, who had been shot in the eye, and his eye was hanging out on his cheek, but he was still shooting at the enemy. So Roy takes him, patches him up the best he can, gives him some morphine for the pain, and then runs off to try to help his other comrades. At this point in time, Roy is shot in the leg, and he actually remembers saying, now your adrenaline's going, guys, but he said he thought he just got his leg caught on a briar. He didn't recognize that he had been shot, but he most certainly had. As he made his way around, checking his guys and trying to get them into a defendable position, he realized that the situation they were in was completely untenable. So he was trying to call for help when he got shot again in another thigh. He eventually made his way over after getting shot again. He kept fighting. Roy just kept fighting. He saw that over pinned down in another section was Specialist O'Connor and the translator, so for the Arvins that were there. So he ended up trying to lay down fire because he had picked up a AK-47 from a dead Vietnamese soldier and started laying down fire. O'Connor managed to crawl his way over to them, but O'Connor had been shot as well. So again, performing medical triage on his wounded soldiers around him, he had kind of formed them up in a semicircle and was trying to hold off this enemy, the 1,000 enemy that were out there. But one person was missing, and that was Sergeant Leroy Wright, who was one of Benavidez' best friends. And he also knew that Sergeant Wright had classified material on him that could not fall into enemy hands. So he went back out looking for Sergeant Wright under intense, withering gunfire, small arms fire, explosives, all this stuff, guys. He went back out trying to find the body of Leroy Wright, which he did find, and unfortunately he was deceased. So Leroy Wright, rest in peace. But Sergeant Wright was there, so he picked up his body and he was trying to get his body out of there. That's when Benavidez was shot in the stomach. As soon as he was shot in the stomach, what's called a Chi-Com grenade it's got a wooden handle on it, and it landed right by him and blew him up. Now, we don't know how long he was unconscious, but it did make, he took a lot of shrapnel from that grenade, as well as being shot in the stomach, twice in the leg now. He was hurt pretty bad, but he did lose consciousness for a time. When he woke back up, and he did wake back up, Roy again drug his dead friend, Sergeant Wright, back to the semicircle and he couldn't have been out too long because the position had not been overrun by this point in time, which you would think that if it was a sustained firefight that this would have happened. So Roy probably was unconscious for a few minutes, although it probably felt like forever. He dragged Sergeant Wright back into the semicircle, the defendable position that he had set up. All the wounded there, everybody's wounded. There's not a single person that hasn't either been shot or hit by shrapnel. They are just getting their ass kicked. And Roy Benavidez understands that they're all going to die here if something doesn't happen. So Roy pops a green smoke, throws the canister out there, starts calling in air support. Now, guys, it's easy to say call in air support and make it sound easy. But if you're a military, if you're a veteran, you know it's not. Calling in air support under any situation is not the easiest thing in the world. It requires skill and coordination. And guys, back then in the 60s, they didn't have GPS. You couldn't mark your location there was some serious problems that come up during these situations. But Roy Benavidez somehow managed to call in airstrikes from F-11s, I think they were called. The type of jet they had at that point in time, and they were dropping napalm in the tree lines, danger close to Roy and these special forces guys. But it actually made the enemy draw back some. Of course it did. It gave them a reprieve from the intense gunfight. And at that point in time, Roy called in a helicopter who managed to land, and as he was dragging his comrades to the helicopter and putting them in there, all of a sudden, when Roy turned around, now he can't see very well at this point in time because he had received shrapnel to his face from that grenade that blew him up. So he's got shrapnel in his back, he's got shrapnel in his face, his eyes are filling with blood, so he can't see very well. And he's still taking fire. So two Vietnamese actually come in from the blind spot on the helicopter because the helicopter has an M60 mounted in it. The door gunner's laying down suppressing fire, but it's mounted, and he couldn't turn far enough to shoot these two bad guys. So Roy shoots these two bad guys and then goes to make his way back out to get more wounded. Well, during this point in time, this is how close and intense the fighting was. This Vietnamese soldier, this enemy soldier, pops up right in front of Roy, and he didn't see him. And he hits Roy in the face with the butt of his rifle, and then stabs Roy in the arm with his bayonet. And Roy's wrestling with this guy, and he looks over, and he sees Specialist Connor laying on the ground, and he's like, shoot him. But Specialist Connor, remember, Roy had given him morphine for his wounds. So he was so doped up at this point in time that he couldn't shoot the Vietnamese soldier wrestling with Roy Benavidez. So Roy pulls out his Rambo Bowie knife, and he stabs the Vietnamese soldier to death. At this point in time, Roy goes over and he gets Specialist O'Connor, takes him back to the helicopter. That's when Roy is shot again in the back. Roy turns around, kills the enemies that shot him in the back, runs out, and repeats till he gets all of his troops, the guys on the ground, to the helicopter. You know, the dead guy. So he goes to get Sergeant Wright's. He runs back out to get Sergeant Wright's body because he is the last person on the ground and he's dead. You know, I mean, so you get the wounded on the helicopter first. You go back for your casualties, the KIA guy. And so he goes back for Sergeant Wright, but when he does, the helicopter behind him crashes because it has received so much gunfire at this point in time. Unfortunately, the pilot is dead, but the 5 guys that he had loaded in, the injured and whatnot that he had loaded inside, were still alive, including Specialist O'Connor and Sergeant Russo. The 2 Green Berets that were still, the guy that had his eye shot out, and Specialist O'Connor, who was so doped up on morphine he couldn't help Benavidez. But they were still alive, so they set up another defensive perimeter, guys. This battle went on for 6 hours, all right? But after 6 hours, a helicopter did manage to land, and under just withering, intense small arms fire, Roy again manages to load up all the wounded, all the KIA at this point in time, all the dead, onto the helicopter. And he was the last man on the battlefield, and he allowed the guys to pull him into the helicopter. By this time, this helicopter had sustained so much damage that it didn't even have instruments, which means the guy that was flying it could not rely on his instrument panel at all. All he had was his sight and was flying by feel, and they took off. And that was the end of the battle. But it doesn't end there for Roy Benavidez. Oh no, guys, because this guy goes to the whole other level of badassery. All right? When they get back to the fire base and the helicopter lands and they're pulling off the wounded and they're pulling off the dead, then they realize that not only had Roy managed to load up all of his dudes and load up all the classified information so it didn't get left behind in enemy hands, but Roy had also managed to load up 3 high-ranking North Vietnamese enemies that he had killed that had intelligence on them for the enemy onto the helicopter. It's insane. The presence of mind, guys, during combat to do the things that he did is beyond anything that I could understand. You know, and I can honestly say I understand a whole lot about it. But boy, oh boy, does this go just beyond something, you know, because combat is chaos, complete and total chaos, and if you're, it's controlled to a certain degree. But that was an untenable situation. Like I said, it wasn't something that was going his way, and to be shot and do this and do that and to do all the stuff that he did while wounded as many times as he was and in the shape that he was in is beyond me. But then not only to save your guys, but to load up 3 bad guys as well. So, because you can get their intelligence is crazy stuff. So Roy and all the wounded are being taken off, and it's still not over. So Roy and all these guys getting unloaded from this helicopter, and they're starting to zip people up in body bags that aren't going to make it. And they put Roy in a body bag. Guys, he had received over 37 gun and shrapnel and bayonet wounds. 37. All right. The gunshot wound to his stomach had actually exposed his intestines, and Roy had been holding his intestines in with his hands. His eyes were now glued shut with dry blood, so he couldn't open his eyes, and the swelling in his throat had made it difficult and almost impossible, in fact, for him to talk because of all the shrapnel wounds he had received in his face and his neck. And so as they were zipping him up in a body bag, one of the other Special Forces guys walking by going, "Man, that's Roy Benavidez." And the doctor says, "Look, he's gone. There's nothing we can do for him." And he's leaning over Benavidez when he's saying this to this other Special Forces guy. He's too far gone. He's going to die. It's over with. And one last ounce of strength that Roy had, he spit in the doctor's face. And the doctor says, "Well, I guess he's going to be okay." And they send him off to get treatment. Roy woke up in a hospital in Japan. Then they, of course, shipped him back to Walter Reed. And after about 9 months of recovery at Walter Reed Hospital, Roy went on to continue his military service. training other Green Berets and Special Forces. Now, the thing is that Roy was initially put in by his CO for the Distinguished Service Cross, which is the second highest honor here in the United States. And the reason he did that, his reasoning is that he wanted Roy to receive his medal, but he didn't think Roy was going to live. And so he thought that he would give him, because you can be awarded the Distinguished Service Cross a lot easier. The process of receiving that medal would go a lot faster, because when you put somebody in for the Medal of Honor, there's a whole process. They have to investigate the incident. They have to go details. They reports the people that were there. They do all kinds of research to look in when they giving the Medal of Honor away. They have to do all this investigation. They look at the person and the action. They look at the after-action reports. They look at they interview the people that were there. They want to really know what happened and to make sure that it's not a made-up story, or that they want to make sure that the person receiving the Medal of Honor deserved the Medal of Honor. But in this case, I don't know why the CO thought, a lot of guys that received the Medal of Honor, regardless of what war they were in, received it because they lost their lives. And I don't know why the CO thought that Roy, I don't think it really mattered. But for whatever reason, he put Roy in for the Distinguished Service Cross. However, in the 1980s, it was reviewed, it was re-reviewed, and Roy was awarded the Medal of Honor. President Ronald Reagan gave Roy in February, I think in 1981, gave Roy the Medal of Honor. Roy got up on stage, and Ronald Reagan spoke. And Ronald Reagan actually said that because Ronald Reagan was an actor before, he was governor of California, but before his political career started, Ronald Reagan was an actor in Hollywood. And he had actually said, when he read what happened and what Roy Benavidez had done, he said that if he had received that in Hollywood, he would have thought that it was untrue, that he thought that it was just a script. It was so fantastic that it was beyond belief. But it most certainly did happen, guys. It's just one of those things, the indomitable spirit of the human beings and the bravery of the United States military and the servicemen and women are beyond compare. As far as I'm concerned, we're top notch, we're number one, and always will be. But that's it for King Pigley today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Go check him out. Go look up Roy Benavidez yourself. You think what I said isn't true? Go check it out yourself. There's tons of videos about it on YouTube. But I thought that everybody should know who the hell Roy Benavidez is, because that man is one bad mofo. That's all there is to it. But that's it. I'm out of here. Thanks so much for being here. If you enjoyed this video, click the like button, hit the bell, slap in that subscribe button. Keep coming back, guys, and hanging out with me, because I love your company. I love telling you guys these stories. But I'm out of here. I will see you guys in the next video.